Hello, today we're going to be discussing the urinary system, chapter 42, Anatomy and Physiology 250. So, we're going to start with looking at some of the learning objectives. We're going to list the major organs of the urinary system, locate and position the kidneys in the abdominal cavity, identify the gross internal structures visible at the coronal section, and describe the renal blood supply, trace blood flow through the specialized vessels of the kidney, and discuss and compare the structure and functions of ureters, urinary bladder, and urethra. Then we're going to explain the mechanism for micturition, that's urination, and name the parts of the nephron, describe the role of each component in the formation of urine. So here's an overview. Kidneys. The kidneys are the principal organs of the urinary system. Urinary system regulates the content of blood plasma to maintain dynamic constancy or homeostasis of the internal fluid within normal limits. Here you can see the location of the urinary system. You have the kidney as a right kidney, left kidney. These are the ureters that come out. So each of them has a ureter. Goes down to the urinary bladder. And then from the urinary bladder goes out through the urethra. And this is the blood flow coming to the kidneys, the left and right renal arteries. Okay, this is picture. This is someone's back. So his arms would be out here. And here's the drawing of the kidney and the vertebral column. And here's the right kidney, left kidney. So this is a cross section. This shows the peritoneal cavity. So this is in the abdominal region, and then it has, you can see the spine, and then the kidneys are on the sides. Okay, kidney shape, size, and location. Roughly oval. Looks like a kidney bean, and lies on either side of the vertebral column. And it has a perirenal, which means surrounds the kidney fat capsule. It's a renal fat pad. It's a heavy cushion of fat that surrounds each kidney. That's an important feature. And here's the internal structure of the kidneys. This is the capsule that covers it. This part is the cortex. And then you have the medulla. See, it says medulla. It's this red portion on the inside. Here's a kidney that's a true kidney that was dissected out. Okay, the internal structure of the kidney. You have a renal cortex, and then you have a renal medulla. So the renal cortex, renal medulla is the outer portion, outer and the inner regions. Renal pyramids make up much of the medullary tissue. Actually, I'm not going to ask these things anything regarding this in the quiz. But renal pelvis, it narrows as it exits the kidney to become the ureter. Acts as a collection basin to drain urine from the kidney. And you can see this is the renal pelvis here. This kind of drains whatever urine is developed from the nephrons, and it acts like a collecting area. Kidneys are highly vascular. You have a renal artery, so it's a large branch off of the abdominal aorta, brings blood into each kidney. Okay, and then it breaks down into afferent arterioles. These extend to the nephrons. And so the nephron is a microscopic functional unit of kidney tissue. So the nephron is the functional unit of kidney tissues. There's millions of nephrons. If you can learn, well, we will learn how one nephron works and filters fluid from the blood. And once you learn how one nephron works, then you just put millions of them together and you know how the kidney works. Okay, it shows circulation of blood through the kidney. And once again, you have the renal artery, and then each one of the nephrons has a afferent arteriole. The afferent arteriole brings blood to the glomerular capsule, and the efferent arteriole takes it away from the glomerular capsule. Okay, the growth structure of the urinary system, you have a ureter. This is the tube running from each kidney to the urinary bladder. Then you have a urinary bladder, which it's composed mostly of smooth muscle and can distend a lot, can distend considerably. Functions as a reservoir for urine before it leaves the body, and it's aided by the urethra, which expels urine from the body. So ureters bring fluid to the urinary bladder, and urethra takes it away. And so it just shows the urinary tract. This is the kidney. Then it has ureter, takes it into the to the urinary bladder. It's the urinary bladder of the female, and then has the urethra, takes it to the outside of the body. The male has a kidney, ureter, goes to the urinary bladder, and then from the urinary bladder, it goes out through the urethra. And as you see, this part here is the prostate. So right near the urinary bladder, then the urethra passes through the prostate. And then so the male and female urinary systems are the same, except that the urethra is longer in the males than the females. The urethra is very short in the females. And this just shows the ureter. This is the inside of the kidney, and the ureter, it has a collection. Actually, I'm sorry. This is the inside of the urinary bladder. The kidneys up here brings fluid down through the ureter and deposits into the urinary bladder. And this cross section of the ureter, it just shows that it is the lumen here, and it distends or can extend as it fills up. Now the urethra is a small tube lined with mucous membrane, extends from the trigone in the urinary bladder. Trigone is the three-part area that has two places where ureters come in and one place where the urethra comes out. That is called the trigone. And so in females, the urethra is about 3 centimeters long. And in the males, the urethra leaves the bladder, passes through the prostate, joined by ejaculatory ducts, and then it goes to the base of the penis, through the center of the penis, ends as the urinary meatus. So as opposed to the females, which is 3 centimeters long, the urethra in males is 20 centimeters long. This just shows with the females, this is all cut out. This is the urethra. This is the vagina that's been cut. And this is the rectum. So the anus would be out a little bit further. That's been cut off. So here's the rectum. Here's the vagina. And this is the urethra for female. Micturition, which is urination. So as bladder volume increases, micturition contractions. So the urinary bladder is made up of detrusor muscles, which is smooth muscle. And so the contractions of the detrusor muscles increases and the internal urethral sphincter relaxes. So the internal urinary or urethral sphincter relaxes. The external urethral sphincter muscle contracts at first. Then when it's appropriate, it relaxes to release urine. So a couple important parts here is that as bladder volume increases, that stimulates micturition. So you have urination contractions. Micturition is the same as urination. So micturition is stimulated by increasing bladder volume. And then the internal urethral sphincter is smooth muscle, so it's involuntary. And the external urethral sphincter is skeletal muscle, so it's voluntary. That's why it's at an appropriate time, it relaxes. You decide when it's going to relax and urinate. And this just shows, in terms of the bladder pressure, as the bladder pressure goes up, the contraction from micturiation spikes at certain points, and it will continue going up as the urine volume increases, the bladder pressure continues to increase, and the desire to urinate keeps spiking periodically until you actually adhere to it and urinate. Nephrons. Each nephron is made up of two regions. So it's renal corpuscle and renal tubule. Once again, the nephron is the functional unit for the kidney. It's microscopic. So you have the renal corpuscle made up of the glomerulus. And so the glomerulus is the afferent arteriole, so it's blood coming in, and that afferent arteriole is a collection, and it just kind of winds around, and it's actually, let's see if we have a picture. Okay, we'll talk about that a little bit further in terms of the the afferent arteriole comes in, it winds around and forms the glomerulus, and then it goes out as the efferent arteriole. So you have what the glomerulus is tucked inside the Bowman capsule. Bowman or glomerular capsule is what actually begins the portion of the nephron that's going to have filtrate that will form the urine. So glomerulus has fenestrations, which are pores in the capillary walls that permit filtration. So this, in the glomerulus, is where you're going to filter the blood, and so it's going to let a lot of things out. Fenestrations are pores or holes in the capillary wall that lets a lot of things flow out, and it'll flow into the glomerular capsule. So everything that was in the blood will be able to be filtered and leave the blood to go into the glomerular capsule, except the pores are not big enough to let red blood cells through, and they're not big enough to let protein through. And this shows some glomerular capillaries. Like this is the glomerular capillary that is going through, and so the afferent arteriole comes in and winds around. So this whole thing is a capillary. This is a bigger picture where it actually shows the glomerular capillary lets fluid through. All these holes lets fluid through, but it's not big enough. These holes are not big enough to let red blood cells through, and it's not big enough to let protein through. But it lets ions through. It lets debris through. It lets everything through, glucose through, everything through that's in the blood except for red blood cells and except for protein. So here's a picture of it here. Here's the arterial capillary and capillary bed, and everything goes through these holes in the capillary walls to get into the glomerular capsule. Except, see how big the red blood cell is? It's too big to go through this hole. This is an electron micrograph of the same thing. Okay, then it goes from the glomerular capsule to a renal tubule. So composed largely of simple cuboidal, simple squamous epithelium. I'm not going to ask you that specifically, but you will have to know that the first portion, the first tubule, is the proximal convoluted tubule. That's the first part of the renal tubule. It's the segment that's nearest the Bowman's capsule. Okay, then you'll have a loop of Henle, which is a nephron loop, and it's just the renal tubule segment just beyond the proximal convoluted tubule. And it's a thin descending limb, a sharp term, and an ascending limb. And I'll show you a picture of that as well. Then you'll get the distal convoluted tubule. And so you don't have to know a lot of this, just know that the next, proximal convoluted tubule, then you have the distal convoluted tubule, then you end at a collecting duct. So the collecting duct collects the newly formed urine, and it will keep going into bigger and bigger portions until it gets to the renal pelvis that will form the ureter. Okay. So nephrons, the blood supply of the nephron. Remember, nephrons are the functional units of the kidney. So blood supply. So you have afferent arterioles. Afferent means coming to. Afferent arteriole enters the glomerulocapillary network, so it's forming that glomerulus. The efferent arteriole leaves the glomerulus and extends to the rest of the blood supply for the kidney. So now we're going to talk about formation of urine. So overview of kidney function. The chief functions is to process blood and to form urine. So urine formed through 3 processes. Know these processes and know what they do. Filtration, movement of water and protein-free solutes from plasma in the glomerulus into the capsular space of the Bowman capsule. So filtration is taking water and protein-free solutes. So anything else that's in the blood other than protein and red blood cells goes from the blood into the Bowman's capsule. That's filtration. Then you have tubular reabsorption. That's movement of molecules out of the tubule and into the peritubular blood, so back into the blood. So anything that passed through filtration and is now passing through the urinary process, it gets anything that we want to keep and go back to the blood. That's where you have your reabsorption. So if you had any glucose that went in, it gets reabsorbed. You have different things, fluid, it gets reabsorbed. Then you have tubular secretion. That's movement of molecules out of the peritubular blood that's around the tubules, and into the tubule for excretion. So things that you do not want in the blood, then it is secreted from the blood and it's sent back into the tubules to get ready for excretion. So here's a diagram of it. This is the afferent arteriole that's coming to the glomerulus. This is the glomerulus. This is the afferent arteriole, and it is continuous and goes around and winds around and eventually leaves out through the efferent arteriole. As it comes in, the fluids will transfer, and so you have water, you have ions, you have everything that's in the blood transfers out. And the only thing that's left, you still have some fluid, of course, left in the blood, but these protein and the red blood cells. Now the fluid that goes through now goes through the proximal convoluted tubule. This is the proximal convoluted tubule. And then in the proximal convoluted tubule, it has the loop of Henle. Then it goes up and it goes around to the distal convoluted tubule. And so between the proximal convoluted tubule and distal convoluted tubule, you have reabsorption. So it reabsorbs the glucose, reabsorbs anything that the body wants to keep. It reabsorbs a lot of water. Yeah? And then it goes down the collecting duct. So those are the three parts: proximal convoluted tubule, distal convoluted tubule, and the collecting duct. Three parts of the tubules. This part is Bowman's capsule. Okay. This is the glomerulus. So let's talk about filtration a little bit. Mechanism of filtration occurs as a result of a pressure gradient. So that's effective filtration pressure. So the main driving force is the pressure of the blood in the glomerular capillaries. So it has about 180 liters of water and solutes filtered into the Bowman capsule each day. A lot of water and solutes. The glomerular filtration rate is determined by glomerular hydrostatic pressure. Hydrostatic pressure is the blood pressure, basically, at the glomerulus, and therefore directly related to systemic blood pressure. So glomerular filtration rate is determined mainly by glomerular hydrostatic pressure. It's directly related to systemic blood pressure. You have to know this part and know that filtration occurs as a result of a pressure gradient. So this shows that hydrostatic pressure is the blood pressure that's coming in, and it's strong enough that it will push fluid out. Osmotic pressure is pressure that water wants to come in because of protein in the Bowman's capsule. There's protein in there, so it wants to draw water in. And there's protein in the blood, so it wants to draw water in there. So, and also Bowman's capsule has some hydrostatic pressure. There's some pressure that's in Bowman's capsule, so it wants to push water back into the blood. But if the hydrostatic pressure or the blood pressure within the glomerulus is stronger than the osmotic pressure of proteins trying to pull it back in, stronger than the hydrostatic pressure of Bowman's capsule, then the hydrostatic pressure is stronger in the blood trying to get out, then you're going to have a net filtration out of fluid. Now with reabsorption, sodium is actively transported out of the tubule fluid into blood. So use energy and actively transport sodium out of the tubular fluid and into the blood. Now water follows sodium, and also glucose follows sodium as well. So glucose and amino acids, they passively transported out of the tubule, follow fluid by sodium co-transport mechanisms. So as sodium's leaving out, glucose and amino acids leaving out as well. And then movement of sodium chloride into blood causes an osmotic imbalance, moving water passively into blood. So this is where we get the water follows sodium. And this is just showing that with, this is the filtrate inside the tubule. So up here you see it says lumen of tubule. This is the wall of the tubule. So the wall of the tubule. This is the space between the tube and the other blood. This is peritubular capillary. So this is the blood vessels. So this is the wall of the tube cells. This is inside the tube. So what happens here is you actively transport sodium out. That's where you need ATP. It's actively transporting sodium out. So sodium keeps getting pulled from the fluid in the lumen of the tubule. Sodium keeps getting pulled in, and because sodium gets pulled in, is pulled through, then water follows it. It actively keeps going, and the chloride actually follows it passively as well. And then the sodium is taken up by the blood, so it keeps being drawn out of the fluid into the blood, and the chloride and water follow it. Okay? And this is glucose as well. This is that when sodium is pulled out actively by ATP, then as it's being pulled through, it pulls glucose with it. And now when glucose is over here, then it passively goes into the blood as well. So the blood is always using and always wants more glucose. So this is just to basically say that sodium is actively transported out, and water follows sodium, and also glucose follows sodium. Okay, and then we have counter measurements mechanisms, and I'm not going to ask you to get in depth with this. So the distal convoluted tubule reabsorbs sodium by active transport in smaller amounts than in the proximal convoluted tubule. So just all the tubules reabsorb sodium by active transport. Active transport means that it's using energy, the ATP, to pump it against its concentration gradient. And production of dilute urine, it just goes more into it and the dynamics on how it actually occurs, which I'm not going to get that in depth about. But as you see here, it actively pumps out sodium. When it pumps out sodium, water follows. Water follows. It pumps out sodium, water follows. Okay. And then now we go to tubular secretion. But tubular secretion is the movement of substance out of the blood and into the tubular fluid. So the distal convoluted tubule and the collecting ducts secrete potassium, hydrogen, and ammonium ions. And aldosterone is a hormone that targets the cell of the distal tubule and collecting ducts. The secretion of hydrogen ions increases with increased blood hydrogen ion concentration. And these are some of the hormones, which I'm not going to ask about the hormones as well, but it's good if you read it and understand it. We can talk about more if you want. But ADH influences water reabsorption, reduces water loss. ADH stands for antidiuretic hormone, which diuresis is urination. And so if you have something that's antidiuretic, that means it's going to stop urination. So that's why it reduces water loss. Okay? Aldosterone promotes reabsorption of water. And so these are some of the feedback mechanisms. I'm not going to ask about that. Urine composition, you have nitrogenous waste. So the nitrogenous waste you get from when you metabolize protein. You have urea, uric acid, ammonia, creatinine, and also it's made up of different electrolytes, mainly the following ions: sodium, potassium, ammonium, chloride, bicarbonate, phosphate, and sulfate. Then also you have different toxins that are in the urine. So during disease, you have different toxins that are being uh, pushed out. You have bacterial poisons that will be filtered out, and they leave the body in the urine. And also you have pigments, especially the urochromes. The urochromes it comes from bile, and that's what causes the yellow color. Then you have different hormones. So high levels may result in hormones spilling into the filtrate. And then you have abnormal constituents like Abnormally, you shouldn't have blood, you shouldn't have glucose, you shouldn't have albumin, which is protein, you shouldn't have calves or calculi. So some of the disorders, you have renal hypertension that's caused by stenosis of the renal artery. So that when it says stenosis, that's like when you have too much buildup, and so it's not getting enough blood to the kidneys. Then the kidney's not getting enough. It thinks it's not getting enough pressure, but it's just because it's not getting enough blood. So it sends out chemicals to increase the blood pressure everywhere, so that it try to get more fluid to the kidneys, and it will cause hypertension. Then you have obstructive disorders, where it interferes with normal urine flow in the urinary tract. So you have little stones and like kidney stones, like renal calculi, and then you'll have the neurogenic or overactive bladder. So you have loss of normal control of voiding. So if your bladder is overactive, then you have loss of normal control of voiding. Then you can have tumors, other obstructions, so the renal cell carcinoma, bladder cancer, and it will stop the flow, stop the normal flow. Then you can, more commonly, you can have urinary tract infections. You can have urethritis, cystitis, nephritis, pyelonephritis. Then you can have glomerular disorders, nephrotic syndrome, glomerulonephritis. You have kidney failure, failure of the kidney to properly process blood plasma and form urine. So you can have chronic renal failure, which is a progressive condition resulting from loss of nephrons. That's over a long period of time. Acute renal failure is all of a sudden something happens where you have loss of renal function suddenly. So, like, you can have physical trauma, and sometimes with physical trauma, it'll recover. Sometimes you have some chemicals that will affect the function of the kidneys, and it may be reversible as well. Okay, so with questions, what I'm going to do, there's a lot more in the chapter, but those are a lot of the main things that I want you to focus on. And also, I'm looking at the quiz. So know the different parts of the urinary system. So you know you have the ureters, the urethra, the urinary bladder, okay, the kidney itself. Also know that how urine is transported. So transported from from the kidney to the bladder by the ureters, and then from the bladder to the outside world, the urethra. Know the major functions of the kidneys. Okay? Know uh, know about the fat that protects the kidneys, the external capsules and all. Know what the functional unit of the kidney is, nephron. And then know about the different processes that we utilize. Know about filtration, and where filtration occurs, where does reabsorption occur, where the secretion occurs, and what each of those means. And then we have a diagram of a nephron. So you have to know a glomerular capsule or Bowman's capsule, proximal convoluted tubule, distal convoluted tubule, loop of Henle, collecting duct. Know all of those. Know that in the glomerulus you have fenestrated capillaries. And so they're permeable to most things, but what's it impermeable to? It's impermeable to protein. It's impermeable to red blood cells. So then know what the main force that promotes filtration in the nephron is. So know how hydrostatic pressure works, how osmotic pressure works, how they work against each other, and sometimes work together as well. And then know what glomerular filtration rate is, and what increases or decreases the glomerular filtration rate. So then know that sodium, what follows sodium? Well, water follows sodium, glucose follows sodium, amino acids follow sodium, chloride follows sodium. Know how much urine in liters that average person will produce per day. And so that usually is between 800 and 2,000 milliliters per day. Know what causes the yellow color. Comes through bile, breakdown of bile, and it's through urochromes. And know what renal clearance is, and to have substances that will measure renal clearance. What substances that measure renal clearance? How can they be? How should they act regarding to filtration, reabsorption, and secretion? So you know that if you have a substance that you want to measure renal clearance, it needs to be able to be filtered because you need to get from the blood to the nephron, and you don't want it reabsorbed, and you don't want it secreted from the blood and adding more into the filtrate. So you really just want something that will be filtered but not reabsorbed and not secreted, and that will tell you how well the kidney is functioning. Know what micturition is, know how it's activated, what initiates the micturition reflex or urination reflex. Know external urethral sphincter, internal urethral sphincter, know which one's voluntary, which is involuntary. Know that the glomerulus is fed by afferent arteriole, and the blood is released from the glomerulus by the efferent arteriole. And know that the filtrate, that's the developing urine, and blood are exactly the same, except that filtrate does not have protein, does not have red blood cells. So when you look at urine, it should have everything that's in the blood should be in the urine except for red blood cells and except for proteins. And then know how it would affect the glomerular hydrostatic pressure, which that's associated with blood pressure. So know how dilation or constriction, vasoconstriction of the afferent or efferent arterioles, how that will affect the glomerular hydrostatic pressure. Okay, so I pretty much, in effect, went through the quiz, and so I didn't ask any specific hormones and those countercurrent and other things that could potentially cause you problems. So just know how the urinary system works in general, and you should do well. All right, look forward to seeing you soon.